Phil, hi. Notice
Hi.
you.
Hi, Peter.
So this is a lovely little group. Now, who else would like to? Uwe, would you like to just introduce yourself briefly?
Yes. My name is Uwe, and for today I take the element from my passion map, being honestly authentic.
Wonderful.
You know, it's the stem, it's the bottom of the stem. If you are authentic, you can carry fruit. That's what I want to get across today.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, I'm Sue Palmer Khan, aka the Divorce Doctor, and the element that I would like to bring from my passion map is that of listening. I just think it's just so important to listen properly, not just hear, but to listen properly.
Thank you. Marty? I'm just going in order of the faces on the screen for me.
My element that I would like to bring up to the group is grace and ease.
Okay. Thank you. And Phil?
Hi, yeah, Phil's my name. The element I'd like to offer up is empathy, given the topic that we're talking about today.
So you're in Sydney, Frank's in Melbourne, is that right?
Yep.
Uwe's in Berlin. Sue's outside London. I'm near Byron and Marty's in the Philippines. So we've got a very mixed group. And I think we've lost Faya Samani. I know her internet there is very difficult for her in Nigeria. She's 22 and she wants to take this work to a lot of the young people in Nigeria. So she'll be at the next training. So wait a sec, there's a chat thing here. Oh, that's from you, Marty. Okay. So can I just start on the topic that, and it was a sort of just an idea about the fact that I seem to be reading about trauma all over the place. And I'm very influenced by Gabor Mate. Has anyone seen his work?
Scratched.
Welcome back. He's written about, if you don't know his work, Google him, Gabor Mate, Mate. And he's getting a lot of coverage for his, and he wrote a book called, it's not called Healed, it's something like that. I'll think of it and let you know. And has done research on healing, and some of which is about people who have spontaneously recovered. And his view is that all of them had reconsidered themselves as whole people. And even in that, just in that process, they're able to heal incurable diseases. Now, his view is that we've all carrying all these traumas. We carry them physically, and we hold all sorts of different traumas, family traumas, social traumas, personal traumas. And then in order to be whole, we have to deal with those traumas. Now, I'm not a psych or a therapist, or, but I do know a lot about having worked with a number of people with passion elements and with passion maps. It's very common for people when, for those who haven't done a map, part of the process is to reach a deeply embodied state and then to actually bring forth the element. And then we go through a process of refining that word so that it carries the most amount of energy. So each of the elements brings us alive in some way. And I have seen many, many, many times where the physical response to an element, to something that they really love, is mixed. You know, part of that is expansive, part of it is contracting. And then as the facilitator, you want to get the expansive bit and leave and move away from the bit that's creating or holding. So I've done this hundreds of times, but I hadn't realized until I read Gabriel's work, or some of his work. And he has a movie out that you might be able to find online called The Wisdom of Trauma. I hadn't realized that that's what we're actually dealing with. You know, if people have, say, happiness or something around happiness, and that gives them both a positive experience, expansive experience, but also a contracting one, that contracting one is probably just the holding of a trauma. So in our basic process, I think we actually are seeing, you know, if we're skillful, quite a few places in which people are holding trauma. Now, the interesting thing about that is that in the passion mapping process, we find a phrase which overcomes the holding part or the traumatic part, or we find an extra element that's able to neutralize it. So I think whether we like it or not, we're actually working with trauma. And that's, so I wanted to learn from all of, you know, you guys, what you know about trauma and how we might, you know, collectively understand it better and to be able to work with it. You know, so for me, it's an embodied tension. It's an embodied tightness. It manifests as that. So, and we're probably born with some of that as well. So could I have a response to, you know, anyone like to respond to what I've started with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with people going through emotional trauma all the time. And in the ones that I have actually completed passion maps, they say it's just so liberating. You know, it's part of the healing process when they see the manifestation in its physical sense of the passion map. They just find it so healing.
Yeah. So when you say emotional trauma, is that different from other forms of trauma?
There's lots of different forms of trauma. You know, people can have physical trauma, but what I'm talking about is the psychological trauma of, say, betrayal. You know, people going through divorce, very often it's because their trust has been betrayed, either through their own actions or through their partner's actions. And dealing with the manifestation of that betrayal turns into an emotional trauma, which can actually, you know, sort of tear people apart.
So how's that held in the body? How's that held by people? My sense is that it's all held physically, but maybe there's a part of trauma that's held that doesn't have a physical manifestation.
Well, the emotions and the behavior and, you know, the physical aspects of the body are so closely intertwined that it's really, they're only really analytically separable.
Yeah,
So,
I suppose
you know,
we are
you know,
one, and we make these distinctions to understand ourselves.
You know, when you think of the, you know, the three brains of the body, you've got the mind or the brain in the head, you've got the brain in the heart, and you've got the brain in the gut. And any one of those can be affected by trauma. So, you know, trauma might manifest itself in digestive problems. It might manifest itself in mental health problems. It might manifest itself in circulatory types of problems.
Yeah. So how, in a passion mapping context, when you're going through each of the elements, how do you deal with those moments when a trauma arises?
Well, you know, when you ask them about the elements, where are you feeling it and how strong are you feeling it? They often will then attach it to an emotion.
Yeah.
So I might then flip into a different modality to get them to release that emotion if it's a negative emotion.
Sure. I don't have a sense of positive or negative. I have a sense of expanding or contracting, because some people might find one emotion positive and someone else finds the same emotion negative. It's either contracting or it's expansing or expansive. It's either bringing us to our core more or fracturing us. That's my mindset. So I'm trying to, you know, put it together. But I know there's a couple of little stories I'd tell. One is, some of you have met Kathleen, and I've told this story many times because it's very powerful. She was a top level sort of qualified facilitator, worked in our top level programs in the other parts of the world, had a massive stroke, couldn't walk, couldn't talk, had to be fed and taken to the toilet and stuff like that. I met her not long after she'd had the stroke, and she was so close to being a vegetable. It was amazing. And what she did was so that's a pretty decent trauma, having a stroke. And whether there was something underneath that, I don't know. But it's she healed herself in large part because she visualized and felt into the experience of her passion map. There was something about the energetic wholeness that held for her that enabled her body to heal. And she's written a book about it if you're interested. It's called Standing Up. And another case that I had was working with a lawyer, a very compassionate sort of guy, and he'd had bad back pain for 10 years or something. He'd had an operation in his back. He came along with his first words were less back pain. And of course that doesn't work for two reasons. One, it's relative, and two, it feeds into an unwanted physical state. And we played with it and played with it and played with it. We came up with words where he had no back pain. His body knew what it was like to have no pain. So I can't remember even what the words are. This is a long time ago. But I just do find it amazing that, I reckon he'd had some sort of trauma around carrying other people's expectations or something. And the words just liberated him from that mind-body connection and created a different mind-body connection, one that was pain-free, was healthy. And there are other stories as well. So I just think that this whole, spiritual self, for want of a better word, or energetic self that we create through the passion maps is of itself incredibly healing and liberating, as you say. So
yeah. Well, there's I can't remember the name of the movement, but there's I was reading about the way that our lives manifest themselves in pain in different areas of the body. So somebody that's carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, putting themselves under a lot of stress, will have a lot of shoulder pain, literally carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. People who are so dependent on, it's usually younger people, but people that's so dependent on others are not standing on their own 2 feet, and they will end up having foot problems or lower calf problems. And there's all sorts of, we've got folk sayings about, like carrying the world on your shoulders, standing on your own 2 feet. And when you think about the way that that's manifested in the body, you can see where the sayings have come from.
for sure. Where's the back? What gives people a bad back?
I don't know. I can't remember, but I mean, it would be, like pain in the backside, things like that.
Pain in the ass.
Yeah.
I haven't had that yet, thank God. But we won't go there.
You can think of all sorts of little sayings and things, and then when you actually think more deeply about it, you can see where it's manifested in the body. But the power of the mind to heal itself, heal the body, is so powerful. Now, I don't know whether people are aware, but when back in 1986, I'd just gone back to work after having 7 years off, and I was to bring up the children. My youngest son had started school, so I went back into teaching, and within months I was having some very weird symptoms, and in the end I was diagnosed with MS. And rather than succumb to it, I worked out a program that would, as far as I was concerned, defeat it. So I took up swimming and running again to get the coordination and the strength back. I took up pistol shooting to stop my hands from shaking and get my eyes working more in tune. And because I was told I might lose mental faculty, I did a psychology degree and then a PhD. And when I went back for my 5-year scan, because you have to have a brain scan every 5 years to see how the lesions are going, the neurologist and I don't know what you call the people that do the scans, but they were just completely astounded that so many new nerve pathways had formed. So, mind over matter is a very powerful thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just want to apologize to Frank for not bringing him back in. His word is dialogue. I'm reading from your chat post, as it allows the sharing of ideas, emotions, and information. And Sue will like this, opened up by listening. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's quite a big consulting area now, where too many consultants go into a factory or a business, whatever, and they try to diagnose the problem. But this whole movement of dialogic reminds me of passion mapping, in that you just get people talking in a way that breaks down barriers, and they literally communicate and find out problems that they didn't know existed. And causes to big issues they've had for a long time, and are able to solve them. And there's something there that I recognize in passion mapping too, because at the end of the day, where I can see a factual map, an emotional map, and a passion map. And they're different, but they're somehow united.
What was the first one?
Factual map.
A factual map.
Yeah, they're all the facts that you discuss. I've got MS. And then there's the emotional map, the what's in the gut, I guess. And perhaps passion map is what's in the heart. Oh yeah, that could be it. Anyway.
Well, I think it's actually in the spirit. I think the emotions are mainly come from the heart, and passion is an expression of spirit.
Okay, I like that.
That's where I've, got to.
Okay, that's good.
I'm giving a talk tomorrow night to the Byron Philosophical Society. On Who am I?
Oh, wow.
And part of that is because so many people I've worked with have just got their maps, and they say, that's me. That's who I am. Suddenly, there's this spontaneous recognition that is who they are at their core. Not everybody, but it's a common thing. Have you had that experience, Phil, with anyone you've worked with?
I haven't actually, no. But the reason I was so interested in this topic was that some of my son's friends were in an accident, and they experienced quite a lot of trauma. And some of the conversations that they've had in the hospital have been about sort of questioning, things like, well, I don't really love, I'm not doing really what I'm passionate about. Life, suddenly they've realized that life is kind of fragile, and thinking about some of those other traumas in their life which they want to kind of heal. And it's not just the burns that they're healing, but I guess the other traumas in their life as well.
Yeah.
It's been a catalyst for thinking and movement, in a sense, to what's important to them.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody wants to live an authentic life, and they don't know how, and they're often stopped by traumas that they can't even see. I was listening to something about the trauma in the United States African American community, how this sort of generational trauma of original slavery is still carried by people there. And who was it? It was a spiritual teacher I was listening to, saying that we all have a responsibility to help people with those sorts of traumas. But it's something that I've been aware of the word and aware of the consequence for a long time, but I now sort of feel as though I want to work with the sort of science and technology of that. And that's where I want to learn. And especially for, young people that, how do they heal their trauma? Faiz Yami, do you have anything to sort of contribute around a young people's perspective on this?
Well, not exactly. We are in different geographical location at the moment, and trauma here is killing. And interestingly, we don't have so much therapies for this here in Nigeria. I mean, everybody is just finding a way to deal with it by themselves and just get through life, coupled with the fact that the country is not a safe place to be at the moment. Our economy is so terrible. And yeah, if you would ask me, I would say almost every Nigerian is traumatized. But so we are just trying to pull
So if you were to heal people's traumas there, where would you start?
Ah, that's why I'm here. I don't know too much. One was while I was researching that website, I'm like, oh, I think this didn't work, and I'm here.
Yeah, well, it's sort of an expanding territory for everybody. Are you getting? Does it get press in Germany, Uwe?
Is it?
Yes, there is. Sorry. There is a lot of talking about it. Actually, since we had our last meeting, when this issue came first up, obviously your ears are wider open for such news and what's happening around you. What I found is trauma is either bodily, physical, or mentally. And the in-between, which could be spiritual or whatsoever, where the heart comes into the game and the guts come into the game and not only the brain, that is not acknowledged really, not in public, because people tend to fear to be called esoteric when they start talking about it. And esoteric has a very questionable taste here in our German society. So yes, there's awareness, and we have brain researchers going public more and more. I know one of them, and we had already discussed these issues about 10 years ago, but then it was quiet about it. Now it comes out because of the COVID-19 situation. People are traumatized because of COVID-19, but what does it mean to be traumatized? And that's the point where discussion has started, or for me, it looks like we are starting it. Nobody here is yet, at least not in my circumference, I cannot see anybody, would link trauma to passion, or passion as a healing factor for or against trauma. From my point of view, it's at a start level. Yes, there's awareness. On an intellectual level, yes, there is a lot of awareness. In general public, it's just not realized what it means.
What about the the trauma from the Holocaust and the shame that Germans, a lot of people in Germany were carried around that? I mean, isn't that a trauma? And hasn't there been a lot of brave initiatives by Germany to deal with that? I heard that someone going to school was given a task by their teacher to say, you're going to be sent away for, tomorrow. What do you take with you?
Yeah. That's still a big issue, a very big issue, especially where those who had witnessed what happened personally are all dying away, so to say. And there's probably three groups. There are those who are old enough to understand what had happened just when they were born, or just years before they were born. I'm probably part of it. Then there's a second group which says, oh yes, I'm aware of what happened, okay, but I go on with my life. And then there's a third group who says, yeah, well, I've heard about it, but I don't know how should I, or why should I identify with it, only because I am German. And that's where different ways of dealing with that trauma, because it is one, come up. For me, I'm completely aware of what there was, to what I know, obviously. I see the guilt of the people of Germany, which will go on. That is not something you can just erase. And I try to find ways to live with it in a sense of accepting that it was there, accepting that it's still in my background, accepting that it's still, how do I say, steer my way of living and communicating. The next generation is probably at the level where they say, yes, we are aware of it, and we deal, well, we think about it in what we do, traveling to other countries and looking into their culture, looking into different religions without being biased about it, and so on and so on. And then the third group says, well, I live here and now, and it's 21, and yes, there was a history, but there was also a history in Australia, in New Zealand, in North America, in South America, with the Incas, and whatever. And they say, well, I cannot identify myself as all the Holocaust which had happened in the world. I go my own way, and I do it now in a different way. I don't want to be steered, I don't want my life to be steered by guilt of my forefathers. That comes up now. And then the fourth group is the deniers, right extreme and whatsoever, which are intellectually, forget it, but they have an influence. And this brings us back into, oh, you Germans, remember you have done it before, and now there's a movement on the right wing, and that could happen again. And
we've got to be careful of you guys.
Yeah, this is a fresh trauma which is developing now.
Do you know the work of Thomas Hubel?
Who will know?
He is probably one of the leading people in the world in his running. He used to run all sorts of, he's a sort of spiritual personal development guru, and he used to run all sorts of programs, and he got to the point where he thought that the real issues are actually trauma. So that's what he's putting 100% his effort into. And he actually is working, I think, also with Gabor Mate.
Okay.
Worth having a look at. He's and he's German, of course, and he started with this whole thing about, the societal shame and guilt and trauma that, it's almost more enduring for the German population than the Jewish population, but who can really say that?
Yeah. You have to be careful saying it.
I said carefully at the end, said, who can say that? It wasn't me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's such a big topic, isn't it?
Can I, because you touched the historical part of traumas developing, I have an example from my own family. My mother and my father had met already before the war because the parents knew each other. And then my father came out of the war, and they married in 1946, and they got in such a deep love because it was not only living together, but it was also working together. My father was a musician, and at the same time he was an officer, a NATO officer in the intelligence branch, because we lived in Berlin and so on and so on. So they were very tight with each other. They couldn't talk about what their work was. Officially, he was a musician. And so they grew together in such deep bonds that was absolutely stunning. For me as a son, I could feel that every day, the energy in that, or the passion in that. Obviously, I would today say the passion in that. The trauma I could observe was that my mother had headaches 24/7. Every day. My father died at 54. The next day, my mother had no headache anymore, and she never had any headache until she died with 86.
Wow.
So the bond and the care for each other created obviously the headache for her. And as soon as the partner, the beloved partner, she mourned the rest of her life about him, it gave her cancer and whatsoever. But the headache was gone because she didn't have to care that close as she had to for their life in togetherness, you know, after the Second World War until my father died in 79. Yeah.
Was that because she was having to carry such a secret?
No, I don't think it was to carry the secret. It was that she cared and feared for my father, because I mean, in that sort of profession or passion, obviously you are much more in danger than as a musician in a dancing orchestra, you know. And she worried about him. I think that pain was a sign of to worry too much, because you're so much in love that you don't want to lose somebody.
Did she ever talk to you about that, or is that your interpretation?
It took a while after my father's death. We moved to Australia then in 81. He died in 97. Elke and I moved to Australia in 81. My mother visited in 82. And we did a trip through Australia, and she saw all the natural beauty. And then one evening we sat down, and we often talked about their work, obviously, because I was the only one who she could talk to. And then she revealed that to me, and she said, you know what, since he's dead, I lost my headache. And I said, well, think about it. And she thought about it, but she would not take the chance to start a new life. She was still mourning until her very last day in life about my father's passing away. So yes, she realized it, but she didn't take it for a chance.
Quite a story, isn't it? I mean, how many stories are there like that of people? You know, I tend to support what Sue's saying. You know, maybe it was just holding onto a secret that was, or even two lots of secrets, whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You know, one thing in the very last moment, the ignition of my father being one of the first officers of the new German army, and then in intelligence. That means officially he worked in Bonn and so on and so on, and then unofficially he was working for the NATO and their intelligence units. Sorry, I lost my point, but I wanted to, oh, my father decided to do that because his father, he was a warden in one of the prisons in Berlin, and he was responsible to observe those people who were resistance and who were on death row. And he tried to make their life as bearable as possible. The widows afterwards sent letters of greatness and thanks and whatsoever to my grandmother. And the same man was arrested and stayed 5 years in a concentration camp, in an East German concentration camp. And then he came back, and 4 weeks later he died. And my father said, that is not right. And that's what was forming his decision to go into that sort of profession.
You call it a profession.
They were already together,
Yeah.
you know, and that created maybe the bond and the pain.
Yeah. So, Fayasiyami, are you connected through to all of the insurgencies? Is that a concern for you personally in Nigeria?
Yes, it is. It is bedtime because each day, I don't know if you know much about what's going on in Nigeria, but each day we hear news about insecurities, about people being killed by bandits, herdsmen, Boko Haram. Every day, like every day, people are dying because of bad roads, People are being robbed in their houses. Very terrible, very terrible. And it's traumatizing alone to even see it on the screen. Talk less of people that are in that environment. I personally lost my uncle to kidnappers while on his way back to Abuja. Very terrible. Yeah,
So
it's
how
a
do you
major
deal with
problem.
that? How do people in that condition, how do people in Nigeria learn to live with that? I mean, they're threatened every day.
Well, uh, if you would ask me, Twitter, having to be online and engage other people that are facing the same thing was one way Nigerians were finding it, and we're trying to deal with it. But now, right now, Twitter is banned. I mean, we can't access Twitter except to use VPN, and people are just there, scattered. If you meet someone now, what's wrong with this? I don't even know. I'm just there. But in my own case, I think it has to do with me understanding that there is a purpose, there is a reason why I'm here. So, and that thing I want to find, that thing I want to know, okay, perhaps I know a little of it, but it, I think that's the push for me, and that's how I'm able to deal with it personally, and how I'm helping other people to deal with it. The moment I see somebody just down, I'm like, okay, I think you are like this because um, you don't have thoughts about your purpose. Because thoughts about my purpose is the one giving me that positivity, optimism that, well, it's going to be fine. And imagine every one of us, we are doing what we are called to do in Nigeria. Maybe it's going to be a better place. No, it's definitely going to be a better place. So yeah, people are not really dealing with it the way they should. They are just surviving and hoping that one day God will just look down on us and it will just happen that we are out of the situation. Sadly.
Well, I'm looking forward to you working with young people. And Farsiam is only 22. She'll be the youngest person in this group. And
Easily.
wants to work with younger people. So that's a beautiful place to be working. And I wish you every success in that, really. I'm sure all our hearts are with you. So thank you. Marty, Philippines
Thank you
is not quite so. Sorry?
I said thank you too.
Yeah. Marty, the Philippines is not quite like that, but you have your traumas too, don't you? With that wonderful president you have who goes around and kills people.
Well, there are actually well, looking at the ratings, there are still a lot of people who actually agrees with him. It's just because we see that there's a lot of change that happened because Philippines, the politicians here, they would want their subordinates or the people that are electing them to stay poor because if you're poor, you're easily manipulated. They can just buy you. So as much as possible, they would want the people like that. And then here comes the election, and then they're just gonna buy their votes, and then they're just gonna promise them with anything that they have in mind. It has been like that for a long time, and then drugs, it's rampant. So when the present administration came, then of course there were a lot of killings, but those who were killed were drug lords and drug addicts. So, and then I've seen it firsthand that there were a lot of my friends who changed. So I see the positive part. I didn't actually look at the negative part because I looked more on the positive as to how it changed my friends. And also it's safer to go out at night, unlike before that, you're just walking and then somebody comes up to you and asks for your wallet and your cell phone and your jewelries. So that happened way before. That's been the normal. But with the present administration, there were a lot of changes happening. So yeah, we were looking at the brighter side. So that's why if there were a lot of people who were asking, how come his ratings are still high? Well, it's just because there's actually a lot of difference in it, and then the media has been, twisting the stories because they wanted to keep the the administration that lost, because they have been in the politics for a very long time, and then they don't want any change. So, and then here comes change. There were some people who were afraid of change, but then since we saw what came upon, or what happened, so we embraced it. So hopefully it's going to be better. So when we talk about trauma, what we noticed is the generation right now, they seem to be very easily hurt. They easily get offended. So I've read in the internet very often that they're calling the new generation right now as the snowflake generation, because they easily get offended. Like, oh, don't say this because I'm offended. You have to, respect what I feel. But in return, they're not actually thinking about how you feel. It's just about them. So, yeah, we're actually thinking how are we going to fix the new generation, or how are we going to help them? So that's actually the new trend. Not really a new trend, but how are we going to be supporting the new generation right now?
And what are you doing? What are people doing to support the new generation in the Philippines? By new generation, you're talking about like 15 to 25-ish, or what?
Yep.
What
Yep.
sort of age?
That age range. Yeah. So I think it's just also about the media influence. That's why they're like that. Because more of them are into social media. They don't, go to their parents and talk. They're just more focused on social media right now. So yeah, and then about talking or how we're gonna help them. Well, with me and my friends, I actually have a close group. There are a lot of us, and then we're into different kinds of stuff. But we tend to talk to the younger generation. Just let them talk and us to listen to them. And then we don't actually just give advice. We listen, and then we share something that what we have experienced before. So just letting them know that we actually understand them. And yeah, I agree with Sue's element, which is listening. So that's where it comes in. And also with Frank's dialogue.
We've got about 5 minutes left, guys. Who'd like to add their thoughts into the mix? We've covered a lot of territory. It's been interesting for me. I hope for you guys as well. Frank, do you have any famous last words? We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Frank.
Sorry, I don't. I
Mate.
get the feeling that once you start to see things from the passion perspective, you'll see a whole new spectrum of colours, human behaviours and thoughts that could only empower one's life experience and their impact on others for the benefit of everyone.
That's
I think
beautiful.
that's true. And one of the things I love is the fact we're not working with emotions, because emotions can be turbulent and distracting, and we're actually working underneath emotions. Doesn't mean emotions aren't important. At some stage you have to deal with them, but to create wholeness first is beautiful.
Yeah, one of my first passion mapping clients, she had two elements which she found very negative, and I said, well, you don't need to put those in. to your map, you know, we'd rather manifest all the positive values. And she said, no, they've got to be there, because until I've conquered them, I'm not going to be me number 2.
And my response to that would be to use some sort of phrase that used conquering in it, rather than have the ones that are directly challenging for her. But that's another conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was it. Her map was a mountain, and she had herself as at the pinnacle. And these 2 elements were the last thing that she had to conquer before she could reinvent herself.
Interesting. Interesting. So, any other last words from anyone?
Yes, I do have to say.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, no,
I said I have something to say.
Yeah? The floor is yours.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I really admire you all, because I mean, you can sit here and find a solution, just like Frank has said it, that the moment you begin to look at this from the perspective of passion, it solves a great problem. But here in Nigeria, I look at my people and I see them dying. Like, I see them down. I'm like, there should be something that we can do. Interestingly, over here, we cannot even have access to all of this. Someone can, I mean, I've not seen anybody doing passion mapping for people here in Nigeria. I've not seen people talk. Okay, there are a few people that talk about personal development, talk about purpose, but there are very few. And these people are not even accessible. So I just admire you guys, and I really, I'm praying to God that we will have more people that are doing this in Nigeria, so that we can help more people. Anyway, well done, everybody.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And thanks all for all the contributions. And it's lovely having these little groups, actually. One of the things I was going to suggest as this builds, and we'll probably do it monthly, I think, rather than fortnightly, to build a bit more energy for it, but is if there's anyone that you want to have a private, you think I'd like to have a coffee with them, then put it in the chat. And you can organize to have a virtual coffee. I think that's a really nice idea.
All right, I'll be glad to do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I know you're going to be a mover and shaker down there, out there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. It's been lovely to listen to you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay in touch.
Bye. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.